This is Stand Up for the Truth, addressing important issues and topics affecting Christians across the nation.
Tuesday, March 25, 2025. I'm Crash. Mary Danielson is back. It's a fresh new podcast today.
It is indeed. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Stand Up. It is Tuesday. Today was one of those days I said, what day is it again? I do that more and more lately. Sue Liebel is my guest for 30 minutes with some headlines to round things out today after we're done chatting. And I'll tell you more about Sue when we introduce her in just a minute. But my scripture is Psalm 25, 1-5. To you, O Lord, I lift up my soul. O my God, I trust in you. Let me not be ashamed. Let not my enemies triumph over me. Indeed, let no one who waits on you be ashamed. Let those be ashamed who deal treacherously without cause. Show me your ways, O Lord. Teach me your paths. Lead me in your truth and teach me, for you are the God of my salvation. On you I wait all the day. Let's pray together. Lord, we thank you for this new day, that your mercies are new each day, and we can trust you with whatever we are facing. Give us grace to face the difficult things, Lord, and a song in our hearts for anything that is praiseworthy. We lift up those who are hurting today and may struggle even to look up, that you'd meet them in their hurt and their grief. Bring healing and rest to their souls in your perfect way and your perfect timing. We lift up Sue to you for her labors for you, her passion for protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Give her continued energy to do what you've given her to do, and have your hand of protection and grace on her and her loved ones. In Jesus' name, amen. Sue Liebel is my guest. She hails from Indianapolis, Indiana, where she has worked for over 30 years in the policy development, lobbying, and political strategy. She currently serves as Director of State Affairs for Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America in Washington, D.C., and as states grapple with it is Tuesday. As states grapple with policy decisions after Roe v. Wade, Sue works with pro-life lawmakers and advocates in the states to advance pro-life laws and programs to help women, children, and families. Sue also coordinates Susan B. Anthony's National Pro-Life Women's Caucus and National Pro-Life Leaders Network, SBA programs that advance pro-life lawmakers who are dedicated to ending abortion by passing laws that save lives. For over a decade, Sue was Vice President of Indiana Right to Life, developing policy and lobbying strategies and serving as its media spokesperson on issues of human life. She's been a busy lady. SBAProlife.org. Welcome to Stand Up for the Truth. Sue, great to have you with us.
Thank you. It's great to be here with you this morning.
All right, tell us about Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America, Women Speak Out PAC, Director of State Affairs. Where do you want to start with that? Tell us about that and the mission statement, because it may not be something that our listeners are familiar with.
Okay, sure. Susan B. Anthony, well, what most people don't know and has been scrubbed from a lot of textbooks is that Susan B. Anthony and her suffragette gal pals got us the right to vote, but they also were opposed to abortion. They called it a crime against women. And that's why we named Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America after her. We exist to get pro-life people elected to office. We play in the political space. In fact, we make no bones about it. We give money and knock on doors and support candidates for office who support life, who will vote for laws that will protect human life. And we've been around for about over 25 years. Last go around for the presidential race last November, we knocked on over 4 million voters' doors across the country. We reached 10 million voters overall with our, postcards and ads and things like that, as well as spent over $90 million. So we are the political arm of the pro-life movement. And in Wisconsin right now, we have a team on the ground knocking on doors. We will hit almost 150,000 doors in that critical race, which I know we're going to talk about in a minute.
Great. Yes. so important to be part of that political process because that's where everything happens here. And the mission is to end abortion. What a great mission to have. Yes, on April 1st
Right.
in Wisconsin is a critical election. Could be the highest stakes election of the year and the most expensive. It's critical for our highest court here in Wisconsin, and as always, state elections have consequences that reverberate around the nation, just like the one in 2023 when Janet Protasewicz prevailed over Daniel Kelly. We were very disappointed by that, and now we have the retirement of Ann Walsh Bradley. So once again, the ideological majority is up for grabs. All eyes are on Wisconsin, and many people who are listening to this have seen the political ads, which unfortunately is not only the first hint that many will get that there is even an election coming up, but these ads are sometimes the limits of what voters, understand about an election. They don't investigate, and so because they're so nasty, they are not helpful. The election between now Liberal Susan Crawford and conservative Brad Schimmel is what's happening here on April 1st. We have an article here, Sue. I'm just going to read this briefly, just part of it. It was on Fox News website, the first part of March, and this kind of sets up our conversation today. So just bear with me for a minute, and we're going to read a couple paragraphs from this. Again, this is from Fox News. Effort to stop extreme abortion activist ramps up in pivotal swing state election. Wisconsin Supreme Court race will have significant consequences on swing states' politics for years to come. One of the top pro-life organizations in the country is deploying resources on the ground in the Wisconsin Supreme Court race, which has become one of the most closely watched contests in the state's history. Women Speak Out PAC, a partner of Susan B. Anthony's Pro-Life America, announced in a Thursday press release it is deploying students to contact Wisconsin voters in favor of candidate Brad Schimmel, who is the Republican-aligned Supreme Court candidate going up against Susan Crawford. In a race that is technically considered nonpartisan. We're going to talk about this, but it says Susan Crawford's track record shows she is an extreme abortion activist, not an impartial judge. She's worked hand in glove with the big abortion industry, led by Planned Parenthood, to wage lawfare against common sense safeguards for women and babies, including health and safety standards and protections against coercion. This is Women Speak Out PAC's communications director, Kelsey Pritchard, said in a statement. And I'll end with this last paragraph. Pritchard accused Crawford of using the same euphemisms as the abortion industry to mislead voters about her abortion position, compared to Schimmel, who has a sound record of respecting the Constitution and checks and balances in our government. So that's what Fox was about. Sue, I naively thought that Supreme Court justices were considered not nonpartisan, just to interpret the law. But I've come to learn over the election cycles that's mythological. What are your thoughts on that concept? Because I don't understand a lot of this. Justices are opposing Trump. They're opposing this, opposing that. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, we unfortunately see, you're exactly right. We see this a lot where judges all over the country think that they're in the position of making the law.
Yep.
Or interpreting the law the way they'd like it to be interpreted. And that is just not the way it's supposed to work in America. Going back to our high school civics class, the legislature is supposed to make the laws. The governor, the executive branch, implements the laws, and then the courts settle disputes, but they are supposed to base it on the law itself, not rewrite it. Mm-hmm. And this election that you're talking about in Wisconsin, a good overview there, it will mean, this is up for grabs. It's going to mean that the balance of the court, just this one judge, is going to mean that the court will either respect the Constitution, as Schimmel has said, just looking at laws based on whether they're valid, whether they in how they impact the Constitution, or in the case of Ms. Crawford, whether they will serve some sort of political ideology. Yeah. Her record is very clear that her ideology drives her decisions. Yeah. And so this is really a very clear-cut case, actually, for your listeners of not just where you stand on abortion per se, but more like where you stand on how you want the state to be run. How true to the law should it run, or can rogue judges make it up?
Yes, and Wisconsin is an interesting battleground anyway. It's more what we call a purple state
Yeah.
because so much of it is red and conservative and gave its electoral votes to Donald Trump in November. But also we have Milwaukee and Madison area, and so that would be blue. It is an interesting mix. I don't know too many other states necessarily who are purple like we are. But Crawford, just a little bit about her, Dane County Circuit Judge, endorsed by Planned Parenthood, of course, and other extremist groups that provide puberty blockers for minors and advocates state control over homeschooling and private school options. So people are getting a package with her, even though it seems like it's just the one, which is extremely important. Don't get me wrong, pro-life is extremely important in this, but there's more to this Trojan horse. Now, Brad Schimmel, former AG under Scott Walker, Waukesha City Circuit Judge, currently endorsed by leaders of Pro-Life Wisconsin and many former and current sheriffs, and he supports the 1849 complete abortion ban law. And Wisconsin, a lot of Wisconsinites are iffy about that. What do you know about that particular law in Wisconsin?
Well,
Go ahead.
thanks. Yes, here's a really important point for the listener. You may think when you hear he supports that 1800 law that he does so because he's pro-life and he's extreme or something. I watched the tape. I watched the debate. What he's saying is that law was duly passed. So in other words, the law is valid. It wasn't made up. It wasn't somebody's idea. I mean, it was the legislature that passed that law.
Yes.
Whether or not it is kept today is up to the legislature, is what he's saying.
Okay.
That as a judge, that's not his role just because he doesn't like a law,
Yeah.
that it has to go. Judges shouldn't be in the business of doing that. And that's what he's saying. That's the kind of judge that you want, is the type of judge that's going to be discerning and thinking clearly about jurisprudence,
Right.
not about political ideology.
Right. And just because a law is old doesn't mean it should be invalid because, well,
We have a lot of old laws.
yeah, exactly.
Right?
And isn't it interesting that Wisconsin became a state in 1848, and here in 1849 already there's an abortion ban law? How interesting is that? Because we don't think of that particular time frame in history as being
Right.
concerned with those kind of things that are more of a modern cultural issue. And here it is, 1849. So good point. Thank you for that. Talking to Sue Liebel this morning, SBA, Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life, sbaprolife.org. And you have a press release page. I really love this page here on the website. And it talks about, because we know now this has all gone back to the states, a lot of great things are happening in the states. They are working on this. Say, Missouri AG Bailey halts dangerous abortion drugs at Planned Parenthood. There's a Texas AG Paxton arrests illegal abortionists, takes action to protect Texas mothers and babies. So there are things that are going on that we don't hear about. What are some of the things that you would want to tell people that are going on the state level that really are encouraging to our pro-life listeners?
Well, those are two prime examples, actually. We're very grateful for the Dobbs decision that overturned Roe, and back to the states. Well, the states are really stepping up to the plate, probably more than they did under Roe, even, to make sure, like, for example, in Missouri, you mentioned A.G. Bailey. He's saying, if you're going to do abortions here, well, you have to have a licensed facility. You have to make sure it's clean. We have to make sure that you're following health and safety protocols. And get this, here's the rub in Missouri. To get a license, they have to have a plan for if a woman has a complication, a problem, that they have a protocol in place, to deal with her medical complication. And they don't. Planned Parenthood does not there, and they won't. And so he said, okay, no complication plan, no license. It's as simple as that. And I'll tell you, that's one of the things that's so disturbing about Susan Crawford, is that she was Planned Parenthood's lawyer, and they didn't want to have admitting privileges, their doctors to have admitting privileges in the hospitals. They didn't want some of those health and safety standards. They fight it. They fight it all the way in all the states, and that should be a red flag for you. But anyway, that's what's going on. Attorneys general like General Bailey, General Paxton in Texas. A woman was mailing the pills in from New York to Texas. A woman wound up in the hospital, which is, by the way, much more common with the pills. They have much more dangerous complication rates. And so the long arm of the law, he reached into New York to charge her. Louisiana has also done the same thing with this woman in New York. And so that kind of activity where states are trying to shield women, protect women from the medical side of abortion and being safe and healthy is really is something we are so pleased to see the states starting to take some ownership at the local level. And so it's not outlawing it. Well, some states have outlawed it. Some states are somewhere in the middle. Some states are all the way to birth. But the idea that women should be safe and that clinics, if we're going to have them, should be clean, that's something everybody should be able to agree on.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that's the press release part of SBAProlife.org. So if you're interested in some of the news out there about what the states are doing. Also, you have something called a scorecard. I like this because it enables people who are inundated with info all day long to be able to look at a glance and see. So tell us about this scorecard. What is it and who is getting graded? I see a lot of Fs here. A lot of red pen. I would, if I was raised by nuns, so red pen everywhere. The House and Senate. Tell us about the scorecard, Sue.
Sure. And you've been on our website. Thank you for looking at the nooks and crannies of our website. We have a lot of interesting charts, graphs, information, news releases.
It's a great website. Yeah.
So the scorecard is our way of holding accountable, keeping track of the votes of members of Congress on pro-life legislation. So we're not tracking every bill in Congress, but those bills that have to do with protecting life, or like we just said a minute ago, the health and safety standards on abortion across the country. And so we will choose, which bills we're supporting or opposing. And we're very active on Capitol Hill in Washington. And then we take note of the votes of each member of Congress, and we put that together and come up with a score. And we show a chart of those bills and then how that person voted, that member of Congress voted on those bills. And so that helps us too when it comes around election time and we want to think about who we're going to support again.
Yes.
It also helps the member, if they have a good grade, to be able to say to people, hey, I've got an A from Susan B. Anthony or a B or whatever. And those who have an F probably don't mention it.
Yeah.
Well, actually, let me change that. Some may be proud that they have, if they're so pro-choice, they are proud that they got an F from Susan B. Anthony. But no, we want everybody to be. It's so very hard to watch and keep track of Congress and what all bills are happening and when and who voted what. And so we try to keep track of that for all of the voters out there.
Sounds good. You guys are doing a lot of great work. I want to mention for those in Wisconsin early voting is open until March 30th. And so far, early voting is up considerably over 2023. It could be turnout is what doomed Daniel Kelly. I don't really know, but this could be a good sign because last year, November, the presidential election, early voting was phenomenal in Wisconsin. And the conservatives came out because they knew what they wanted. And I'm hoping that this will be the case, that this Protasewicz Daniel Kelly debacle, that we learn something from it. That's my hope, and that voters will get out. So I want to encourage Wisconsinites to check your municipalities for locations. Also, you can go to myvote.wi.gov and they have scorecards and they have all the latest where to vote. It's just a tremendous website. So Wisconsinites, do your civic duty. We want to encourage you to do that. So I want to ask you, again, this is Stand Up for the Truth. My name is Mary Danielson, talking to Sue Liebel from Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life, and what a great job they are doing. You have social media presence. Is there a podcast also that where people can be interacting with Susan B.?
Yes, we have a podcast series that we call Exposed.
Okay.
And you can find a link to that on our website. Exposed takes a look each episode, something having to do with the abortion industry. In fact, I'm just finishing up the one about the founder of Planned Parenthood, Margaret Sanger.
Oh, okay.
Who was a eugenicist and was trying to eradicate populations of people that she thought did not deserve to live. That was back when Planned Parenthood was called the American Eugenics Association, and they ended up changing. They wanted something a little more catchy. There's also I've done this quite a while, as you kind of went through my resume earlier. I've been in this business for a long time and been pro-life. And I remember, and I'm sure you do too, in 2015 when David DeLeiden and their Center for Medical Progress came out with those undercover videos.
Yes.
Alleging, Planned Parenthood selling baby body parts and all of that. Well, we did a sit down on our podcast with David DeLeiden just a few weeks ago, and that's another episode of our podcast. I learned things that I didn't know about the industry that's grown up about buying and selling baby body parts. This is not for the faint of heart.
Yeah.
This is not an enjoyable podcast to listen to, but it is shocking. And how many years he prepared to get in and get behind the curtain, if you will, at Planned Parenthood. It's just shocking, absolutely shocking. Everybody should listen to that. If you're considering a vote for Susan Crawford, you should listen to this podcast. Because it's black and white. It's an open and shut case.
Wow.
Anyway, there's also a 3-part series on how Planned Parenthood specifically targets or tries to get more customers from women of color and other racial backgrounds. How they are putting their clinics in certain neighborhoods to get more, and they even say they feel like minority women need more abortion, which is just ironic given their beginnings as a eugenics organization. But anyway, I highly recommend our podcasts. Even I'm learning a lot of things by listening to them.
Sounds good. Yes, I encourage people to. I'm really glad you did something on Margaret Sanger, because there's a lot of context there. People need to understand who she was, what she did, and how we got here. Also, in latest press releases on the Susan B. website, talks about parental rights and informed consent will be on the chopping block as far-left activists seek to use the courts to expand abortion on demand with no limits across America. And this starts with, here's your part, Wisconsinites, defeat Susan Crawford. In the time we have left, Sue, talk to us about the parental rights and informed consent, because that, to me now, that's just part of keeping parents out of the equation of raising their kids, and that includes their teens and young adults. Talk to us about that.
Well, it's just shocking, and most people probably don't even believe that it's really true, but it is. In fact, you mentioned earlier, Attorney General Bailey in Missouri caught Planned Parenthood. They're under investigation now and prosecution for taking a minor across state lines to get an abortion without telling her parents.
Wow.
And that school, too, not just Planned Parenthood, but her school. So it happens. It happens all the time. They will not stop until they have full access to our young girls. And so the other place you need to look for this is those states that had ballot initiatives in November on their
Okay.
ballot about a question, if their state should have abortion, like Ohio or Missouri. In Florida, they lost. You might remember Governor DeSantis came out against that in that ballot question. But in Michigan was one of the first to go. And very shortly after that ballot initiative passed, saying that there was a right to abortion in Michigan, the legislature, then the Democrat-controlled legislature, began to take down all the parental rights, or consider it. Some passed, some didn't. Waiting period, informed consent, even. I was telling you before we went on air, I'm going to get my knee replaced. I'm going to get lots of papers that tell me about a knee replacement and what they're going to do, and what I have to do, and ad nauseum, I'm going to get information. In Michigan, they wanted to, take that away for women getting an abortion. So Planned Parenthood wants to pull down. The abortion industry is vicious about making sure there are no obstacles whatsoever for women. But sometimes that then takes them much further than we want them to go. And the parental rights issue is so important here.
Yeah.
We don't want them doing that to our girls.
Yeah.
And that is something that Susan Crawford argued on behalf, she was their lawyer, so she argued on behalf of Planned Parenthood against parental rights and a waiting period, a reflection period. This is a lifelong decision. This is a very key decision that a woman will most always regret for the rest of her life. And having a waiting period, like we do with lots of other procedures as well, is not unreasonable.
Right.
I think I misspoke about Susan Crawford's record on parental rights. It was hospital admitting privileges and women being coerced into abortions, trying to protect women at that point where we learn maybe that she's being coerced.
Yeah. And I've noticed too, the political process throughout my lifetime and the reference to being pro-choice. You don't hear that anymore. It's pro-abortion. Now, that has changed. I noticed that last year considerably in the presidential election. Also, euphemisms like, well, this is health care. Now, women won't have access to health care if abortion isn't legal. I mean, that's crazy. We have about a minute left, Sue, and I want to be able to give you a chance to say maybe something that we didn't get to cover. I know they'll be canvassing Wisconsin, the whole state, so everybody door to door. So what would you want? We have a minute. So what did we forget?
Okay. I can just tell you that I think we should say that lives will depend on this race. Wisconsin voters showing up to vote. These races are more important than ever thanks to the Dobbs decision now. And if we have activist judges, we're at risk of having, more abortion on demand across the country without parental rights, as we were talking about. And we don't want that for Wisconsin. Wisconsin doesn't want that for Wisconsin. It goes too far. So the decision in this race is going to mean either following the current law or an activist court.
Yeah. It is huge. It really is huge when you put it just that way in black and white. We appreciate you, Sue, and Susan B. Anthony, SBAProlife.org, which is a great website. If you want to keep up on these things, it's a wonderful website. And so I want to thank you, Sue, for your time today. And Wisconsinites, get out and vote on April 1st. Thanks, Sue. Thanks. Have a wonderful day. All right. Yes, very knowledgeable, Sue, on that issue. So, and when we come back, after some ads here, I want to talk a little bit more about what else is on the ballot for April 1st, and just to let people know a couple of things. Nothing major, but we want to make sure that you're informed on this so you know how to vote. And also a few headlines coming up in the second half today on this Tuesday on Stand Up for the Truth. So in 2 minutes, we'll be back with a whole lot more. Stay with me.
Thank you so much for sharing today's Stand Up for the Truth video podcast. We invite you to check out our other headline news site, ctrnn.org. That's ctrnn.org.
Feedback, questions, and topic suggestions are always appreciated. Email us at comments@standupforthetruth.com.
Welcome back to Stand Up for the Truth for this Tuesday, March the 25th. We just concluded the first half with Sue Liebel from Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life, and she helped us to parse out the Wisconsin election coming April 1st. And, of course, here at Q90, we encourage you to get out and vote. Early voting is open until March 30th because we have an ideological balance of the court at stake here. Early voting is up considerably. I think that's a good sign. I hope so anyway. Check your municipalities for locations. Others on the ballot are running for Superintendent of Public Instruction in Wisconsin, conservative Brittany Kinzer and liberal Jill Underly. I'm starting to see ads for that. And if you've seen the ads for Schimmel and Crawford, they are pretty nasty. So do your homework on these things. Also, a constitutional amendment adding our existing voter ID law to the state constitution. So voting yes on that is a very good idea. It doesn't change the voter ID law, so you need to know that's not at stake here. But a yes would accomplish that. A no would not allow it to become part of the Constitution. So summarizing that, Wisconsin already requires voter ID. Once it is amended into the Constitution, it is much harder for a state court to strike it down or lawmakers to repeal it in the future. So do vote yes on that amendment about voter ID law to be amended into the state constitution. myvote.wi.gov is an excellent resource for all of that. So that's it on the election, which is a week from today. I want to talk about two upcoming prophecy conferences. I always like to promote those, so wherever you live around the country, you can take advantage if there's one in your area. The first one is the Midwest Bible Prophecy Conference at Calvary Chapel, Lafayette, Indiana, with Pastor Joe Bell. Years ago, I've been to that a couple of times. Very well done. Saturday, March 29th, so that would be this Saturday, the Midwest Bible Prophecy Conference. His guests are William Federer, Patrick Wood, Thomas Ice, Erwin Lutzer, and Tom Hughes. Excellent lineup. And for more info, you can go to C Chapel BP, Bible Prophecy, cchapelbp.org. The second one is in Wausau, Wisconsin. It is something called a pop-up prophecy conference. Well, what is a pop-up conference? April the 5th, that would be a week from Saturday. Speakers are Jeff Kinley and Todd Hampson. Todd will be my guest at the end of April, and we'll talk about all this and more. Even though this one will be past, I want to introduce you to his ministry. It is at the Bible Truth Chapel in Wausau, Bible Truth Chapel. Now, these pop-up conferences are put on across the country, so they take them on the road. They're designed to teach the basics of Bible prophecy in 4 lessons and then a Q&A at the end. It's $25 including lunch. And again, these are solid teachers. You can visit The Prophecy Pros, P-R-O-S, theprophecypros.com to get a feel for who they are. If that's something that even your church would want to sponsor, you can decide that. Also on YouTube, you can find the introduction to these types of events. Tim and I are planning to be there on that Saturday, April the 5th, and see what that's about, a pop-up prophecy conference, Bible Truth Chapel in Wausau. All right. There is a new program out there called House of David, brought to you by the House of Amazon. And if you're going, oh, I don't trust it, well, you're probably right not to. But we're going to talk a little bit about this. I'm curious if anyone has seen it. So drop me a line if you have watched this mini-series, comments at standupforthetruth.com. I'm going to read 2 takes on it. And they couldn't be more different in perception. I don't trust the evangelical industrial complex on these things to get films made that depict, the Bible accurately. Most of the time it is not even close. And they have to earn our trust, at least mine, being the chosen, being what it is, what it has become. Those who defend the chosen say, well, it's just, creative license, etc., and it's really fiction. Well, the Bible is nonfiction. Jesus is nonfiction. The people that they are putting words in their mouths, these are real people who lived. And I challenge people, if a book or film is made out of you, out of your life, and puts things in your mouth that you would never say, you'd be the first one in line to sue, I'm pretty sure. And I think it is not a valid media to take nonfiction, especially when Jesus is the Word made flesh and words are being put in his mouth. I think this is so dangerous. It is wrong. Now, House of David is a little bit different, I guess. So, just hear me out on this, in that we've all seen biblical movies, Jesus of Nazareth and others, over the years that were actually true to the Scriptures. And this is the Old Testament, so people will make an argument. I'm just sort of being devil's advocate here. People will make an argument that this is completely different. Let me just read these two takes, and then I'm going to talk a little bit, because I did watch the first episode. Again, we're talking about House of David from the House of Amazon. So right away there's red flags. The Free Press says, 2 Christians made a show about Jews, and it's phenomenal. House of David is a beautiful corrective to a lie that has seeped into American culture, that Christians see Jews as enemies. I saw the first episode. I have no idea what they're talking about there, but it says, Free Press, there's a new show on Amazon right now that gives the most accurate portrayal of how American Christians see the Jewish people that I've seen in a long time. House of David is a biblical drama from brothers Andy and John Irwin, a duo of Christian filmmakers from Alabama. It tells the biblical story of King David, author of the Book of Psalms, who was a shepherd, musician, and poet before he came to the throne. And it's phenomenal. There's much for Jewish audiences to love. Set in Israel in 1000 BC, the series brings the biblical story to life with compelling characters of the sort that the Bible excels at. The show is respectful of the source material while taking some subtle liberties. Agag, king of the Amalekites, the prototype in Jewish tradition for hatred of Jewish people, is portrayed as a cannibal, for example. It has a healthy number of Israeli actors thrown in the mix, and the on-screen text identifying settings appears first in Hebrew and then in English. And when David sings, he sings in Hebrew. Of course, they don't do subtitles on any of that, so you don't know what he's singing. But the article says, for those of us steeped in biblical texts, it's a joy to see our scriptural world brought to life so artfully. But the show's important contribution is in exposing liberal American Jews to the way of so many of our Christian neighbors see us, not as an oppressed victim caste who killed Christ and should be loathed, but rather as an ancient noble tribe of warrior poets and kings favored by the blessing of the God that they serve. And it goes on to talk about American Jews and the misconception about them. I saw the first episode. I don't know if I got to dig deeper, but I didn't see any of that. I don't know what he's talking about. So listen to this. This is from Daniel Greenfield, whom I quote often here. He's a Jew. He's not a believer, but his perspective on Jews and Israel and anti-Semitism is always just so profound. His Front Page Magazine article says House of David replaces Jews with Muslims. So here's a completely different take on this. And he says biblical Israel just wasn't diverse enough. The story of the rise of David, a shepherd boy, into a hero, a king, and one of the great religious lyricists, is a phenomenal drama that Hollywood has fumbled again and again for different reasons. 1951's David and Bathsheba was the typical clunky, over-dramatized spectacle of the era. And the less said about Richard Gere as David, and that was years later, the better. NBC's Kings was an interesting but baffling series setting the struggle between Saul and David in a modern-day New York City ruled by kings. Amazon Prime's House of David is more repugnant, but that has more to do with our own age than anything else. Our age is woke. Amazon Prime's originals are particularly woke, and House of David starts out by jettisoning the Jewishness of the story in the most woke way possible by replacing both Saul and David with Arab, Muslim actors. David, traditionally seen as a redhead, becomes the latest ginger to bite the dust and be replaced by what woke Hollywood decided is a more diverse appearance. And yes, he looks very Arab, and I was very put off by that particular actor. Nothing personal to that actor, but I noticed this right away. All right, Mr. Greenfield goes on to say, I recently wrote about a William Tell adaptation bringing in Muslim characters to show how diverse 14th century Switzerland was. Biblical Israel was also apparently a very diverse place, but in typical woke DEI fashion, that diversity only goes one way, sidelining people who look the wrong way and replacing them with more diverse Arab Muslims who look the right way. Woke replacement theology stems from the conviction that Jews are colonial invaders in Israel and the Arab Muslim invaders are the legitimate residents. Okay, there's a red flag. And while you're watching this, and just the cinematography, you may not pick up on that. And that's why I'm reading Mr. Greenfield's take on this. Having transformed Jesus into a Palestinian, the next inevitable stage is an Islamic reading in which King David as Daoud, a Muslim, not a Jewish figure. So David is already in Islamic writings. Okay. There is no reason why King David needs to be played by a Jewish actor, and the role has rarely been played that way, no more than Saul needs to be played by a Jewish actor. But replacing them both with Arab Muslim actors in a movie that was filmed in Greece was certainly not a case of staffing lead roles with locals, and that's not a coincidence. It's a deliberate statement of the woke view of history. Amazon Prime has long made a point of its diversity quotas, which are even more militant than those of any other streamer, leading to Rings of Power, a Lord of the Rings multicultural knockoff series, and now a King David story with the protagonist recast to symbolize the replacement of the Jewish population. Wow. If you've seen it, like I said, you may not have picked up on that. Daniel says, what's at stake in such narratives is that they deny cultural history. The conviction that people in the Middle East must have looked like the Arab Muslims would later go on to conquer it reverses history. It also covers up the Islamic conquest that actually made much of the Middle East look the way that it does. An Islamic David pushes the false genocidal notion that native peoples are more authentic as they get darker and more invasive as they get lighter. This kind of thinking helped justify the ISIS atrocities against the Yazidis, who in many cases had light hair and eyes. It is used to justify a good deal of woke racism today. And he ends with this. Woke replacement theology feeds racism and anti-Semitism. It justifies genocide. And it shows a complete disrespect for the culture and the biblical narrative that it claims to be interested in. I did watch the first episode. I found it a bit dull. Some people say it's the most exciting thing they've ever seen. I found it a bit dull. I love the guy who played Samuel. What can I say? I thought that was fantastic. But they embellish so much just in that first hour. You know, if you love the stories, and these are dear to your heart, and you love the people God chose in these stories, the creative embellishment just sucks the life out of that. I do love the story of David, and I do love the story of Saul. And as we were watching this, they'd get something right, and then they'd completely go in a direction that you did not see coming. That is an incredible injustice to these characters and who God chose. If you can tolerate that sort of embellishment, you know, you might get something out of it. If that just totally throws you, and it probably will if you're familiar with the scriptures, then you are not going to like it at all. So anyway, I wanted to throw that out to you. Have here sort of an uplifting story. You know, I like those because we live in times where uplifting is hard to find. So here's our uplifting headline of the day. Rescued astronaut applauded for his bold faith, proclaiming the gospel while stranded at the space station. I like this. This is from Harbinger's Daily. After 9 months stranded on the International Space Station, Captain Barry Butch Wilmore and Captain Suni Williams have returned safely to Earth after being retrieved by the SpaceX Dragon spacecraft. Yay. The astronauts' homegoing was intended to be a mere 8 to 10 days following their arrival in June of 2024. However, after several malfunctions with the Boeing Starliner capsule were discovered, re-entry became impossible. The situation became even more dire after crossing the 6-month mark, which is the maximum time astronauts are able to remain on the space station without significant health risks, including loss of bone density. As months passed, SpaceX reportedly urged then-President Biden to allow their crews to recover the astronauts. Elon Musk stated their offer was flatly rejected by that admin, adding in an interview with Fox News' Sean Hannity that the astronauts were left up there for political reasons. Shortly after taking office, Donald Trump gave Musk the go-ahead to send the SpaceX crew on the rescue mission, which successfully returned the two home last Tuesday. Astronaut Barry Wilmore, despite the dangerous conditions and separation from his family, boldly shared his hope and faith grounded in Jesus Christ. In an interview with CBS while still stranded, he said, Quote, "My feeling on all of this goes back to my faith. It's bound in my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. He's working out his plan and his purposes for his glory throughout all of humanity, and now that plays into our lives, and it's significant and important. However that plays out, I'm content because I understand that. I understand he is at work in all things. Some things are for the good. Go to Hebrews chapter 11. Some things look to us not to be good, but it's all working together for his good and for those who believe." That's the answer. Evangelist Franklin Graham and FRC President Tony Perkins gave glory to God for the rescue of the astronauts and commended the astronomical faith of Captain Wilmore. Following the crew's return home, Answers in Genesis founder and CEO Ken Ham, who stayed in contact with Wilmore at the space station, also praised the Lord for his safety and proclamation of the gospel. Ken Ham says Barry is a great friend of this ministry. He's kept in touch with us during his unexpectedly long stay aboard the space station. We're thrilled that he and Williams have returned to our planet safely and begun their rehabilitation as they adjust to the effects of gravity on their bodies. Please be in prayer for that process, that there be not any long-term health consequences. Barry loves Jesus, Ken says, and is so bold about his faith, further applauding him for using the CBS interview as an opportunity to proclaim Christ. And of course, here at Q90, we rejoice in any opportunity to proclaim Christ on that public level. Ken Ham says we've been praying for him and for Suni as well, that the Lord would open the way for them to be able to get back. Barry's a wonderful Christian man. He's a creationist. He has spoken for AIG on a number of occasions. The Lord has a great ministry for him. He will also be at the Ark Encounter, it says, for the first ever astronaut encounter, July 12th. So if you're thinking of going to the Ark Encounter, July 12th might be a good time to do that. That's an uplifting thing for today. Got time for a couple more here. This one's about Israel. Again, from Harbinger's Daily. This is from Amir Sarfati. And the headline is, this is from March 20th, Israel is once again in full-blown war, this time with the powerful backing of America. Headlines these days on a lot of fronts have gotten reframed now. Have you noticed since Trump took office? A lot of day-to-day is being reframed from old Joe, the Biden admin, to the Energizer Bunny that I call Donald Trump. And I think Christians who watch the news are sensing this kind of reframing on a lot of headlines to see where things are going. They're in a wait-and-see mode and coming down on things from a wide range of perspectives at this point, past the November election. And it varies, everything from Trump is the Antichrist to Trump is an unwitting globalist and everything in between. And I don't want to make any statements on any of it because we really don't know. It is way too soon to know, and we need to just see what God is doing here. But from time to time, I like to observe that chasm between the previous administration and the current one, and always look through the lens of prophecy. So this from Amir Sarhadi. This is from the 20th. And he says, again, the headline is, Israel is once again in full-blown war, this time with the powerful backing of America. Shalom from a nation that is once again in full-blown war, he says. And that's both a bad thing and a good thing, because in war people get killed. But sometimes those who die are fighting on the evil side and sometimes on the good side. But either way, death ends a person's window of opportunity for salvation, and this is always a tragedy. Amir goes on to say, sometimes, however, war can be good because it has the potential to accomplish a task that must be done. This is true in Israel's case. When we first signed the ceasefire with Hamas, I told you a day would come when the terrorists would break the agreement, hostilities would once again commence, and we have reached that day. While I wish we could have received our hostages back and seen the dismantling of Hamas without any more bloodshed, it seems the terrorists had other plans, so there will be more bloodshed, more destruction, and more sorrow. And of course, we continue to pray for Israel. Amir says, but this time, because Israel has the full backing of the U.S., the hostilities will continue until Israel's war aims are complete. Now that is, again, we are reframing this war in Israel since the inauguration of Donald Trump. He says, amidst the darkness of war, at least that is one shining light. As always, there is howling at the return to fighting by the international media. including most of the worthless news sources in Israel, saying Netanyahu is using war to hold on to his power. When you read those headlines, remember, so it got cut off. Sorry. Let's go to the next paragraph here. There's been a major shift of activity in my part of the globe and throughout the world. Russia, Ukraine, Turkey, Iran, Lebanon, Syria, Israel, Gaza, the West Bank, Yemen, Europe, the U.S., Canada, Egypt, China, and many other nations are experiencing great changes. They are facing major decisions regarding alliances and future actions. Almost all of this fluctuation is tied to the Trump factor. You may love him, you may hate him, but there's no doubt that he is a catalyst for change in the structured world order and the most significant geopolitical figure alive today. So that's what we're talking about when we're reframing world events based on the election of one particular man. Very, very interesting. Anyway, Amir comes back to the war in Gaza. He says the collapse of the ceasefire was inevitable. As the late Foreign Affairs Minister Abba Eban said, the Arabs never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. Hamas began dragging its feet on the return of hostages because the captives are the only currency that they have that is worth anything. Finally, the negotiations broke down, and Israel, supported by the U.S. completely, renewed hostilities. It's interesting to think about what it might have been like if Trump had not gotten in. But he says, as Netanyahu stated, from now on, negotiations will only take place under fire. Aerial attacks by the IDF last Tuesday took a heavy toll on Hamas. More than 400 were killed, most of whom were Hamas, and many of those were high-level players. So the beat goes on over there. And, of course, the media wailed that women and children were among the dead, but and that is true and can be true anytime, of course. This is what happens when you're fighting an enemy that uses its own people as human shields. And, of course, we know that Israel does everything they can to minimize civilian losses. But the IDF cannot lay down their weapons because of that. So it's a no-win situation, of course. But God is working in Israel, and that is the difference. Amir says, why doesn't Israel just pull out and let everything go back to what it was before? We can't do that because we know Hamas. And in testimonies from the returned hostages, it's clear that the tunnel digging never stopped, and they've been planning a second October 7th style invasion. So this is why. Amir says this is why this ground invasion began with bulldozers to try and level everything in northern Gaza. So hopefully they won't continue to kill any more hostages that are left. I know there are some that are dead that have not been returned as well. But these are their currency. You know, terrorists know that this works. And so that is why they do that. That is their playing card. Amir also says Hezbollah is on their last legs in Lebanon. The U.S. is striking in Yemen. There are still Russian-Ukraine peace talks. This is a very long article. But that is on Harbinger's Daily. I encourage you to read that. Again, the headline is, Israel is once again in full-blown war, this time with the powerful backing of America. And he goes through every aspect of this, which we also went through with Lieutenant Colonel McGinnis last Friday. We went around the world in 60 minutes. That was incredible. Erdogan, he mentions Erdogan. Is Erdogan going to fail? I don't know. Turkey, we can't discount Turkey in all this. They are very dangerous, lurking there behind the scenes. So read up on that article if you want to know the scoop on what's going on in Israel. So much is going on. That is basically it for today. We are so grateful for Sue Liebel talking to us about the election a week from today. Again, Q90 encourages the listeners to vote, especially when it comes to pro-life. People say, well, that's political. Well, no, it's a moral issue. Humans are made in God's image, and it is murder. So we encourage you to vote. And also voting for, being able to spread the gospel freely. That is extremely important to Christians. We want to be able to make the most of the times because the days are evil. Thursday, Dr. Ted Baer of Movie Guide. He goes back a ways. Some of you old-timers know who Ted Baer is. We're going to talk about the culture and media and the effect on our kids with Dr. Ted Baer. He's been at it for a very long time. God bless him. So that'll be the first half on Thursday. The second half will be some more headlines We'll just take a walk through some of the headlines of the day. Friday, apologist J. Warner Wallace. He's going to talk about his new book, something completely different. I'm just going to tease you with that. Something he has not done yet. He is just a fantastic apologist, and that will round out our week here on Stand Up for the Truth. Watch. Stand fast in the faith. Be brave. Be strong. Let all that you do be done with love. 1 Corinthians 16:13. That's it for this Tuesday. Thanks for listening. We appreciate you all. God bless and have a wonderful rest of the day.